Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Rozelle. I serve as the Dean of the Schar School of Policy and Government here at George Mason University, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce our special speaker this afternoon, Russ Banham, who you may know as the author of Fight for Fairfax. And we have many copies there for those who are interested. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Russ Banham's trajectory did not follow a straight line. He has achieved an impressive series of personal accomplishments in diverse fields, including acting, directing, producing, writing feature articles, plays, and many books. Early on, Russ was an actor, appearing in Broadway with Zero Mostel in Fiddler on the Roof, co-starring with Bill Murray in his first movie, the summer hit Meatballs, and playing the role of the working-class painter Brad Hopkins in Norman Lear's TV sitcom Joe's World, all of these back in the 1970s, the greatest decade, by the way. When his career in acting stumbled, Russ changed course to produce plays off-Broadway, directed by and starring a slate of Tony Award winners. When that didn't pan out, he became a reporter at the Journal of Commerce, a 180-year-old daily newspaper on Wall Street, and the Journal nominated him for the Pulitzer Prize in Investigative Journalism in 1987, and he was a finalist for that award. Russ changed course again and became a freelance journalist, writing feature articles for scores of business publications such as Forbes, U.S. News & World Report, The Economist, Financial Times, and the Wall Street Journal. Altogether, he has written more than 5,000 feature articles and continues to write at a pace of 2 per week. 25 years ago, a book publisher asked Russ to write the history of a 100-year-old insurance company. That book led to his histories of iconic American companies such as Ford, Boeing, Coors, and Airstream. He has written 30 books in all a mix of history and biography, several selling in the hundreds of thousands of copies. And all this while, Russ kept his hand in the theater, writing or directing more than 40 professional plays produced primarily in Seattle and Chicago. The Seattle Times awarded him the newspaper's Best Director Footlight Award 5 times. In 2007, Russ was contracted to write the first edition of The Fight for Fairfax, a post-World War II political and economic history of Fairfax County. The success of that book and the accurate predictions Russ made about the future of the region prompted a second edition, right over here, published in 2020, continuing our amazing story. Russ is a second-generation American whose maternal grandparents arrived at Ellis Island in the early 1900s. Neither spoke English, nor could read or write, an irony considering his profession. He grew up in a row house on a dead-end street in Queens, New York, and sold hot dogs for the New York Mets from the ages of 14 to 21 to pay for college tuition. And I told him I think I bought hot dogs from him because in the 1960s I grew up in northern New Jersey and went to Shea Stadium all the time. I was a big Mets fan, so we probably ran into each other and didn't know it back then. He is here today, though, to tell us the story of the founding fathers of George Mason University and much of the rest of Northern Virginia. I am pleased to welcome to the Mason community, Russ Banham. Russ?
Thank you, Mark. I think it's great. Oh, it's so nice to be here today, and what a wonderful set of presentations earlier. I want to thank Dean Rozelle. I got to know Mark quite well back in 2018 when we contemplated a second edition of the Fight for Fairfax. But before I begin, I do want to mention that I'm not going to make any jokes at the expense of anyone's wife, or husband, or partner, or pets. I know my book is called The Fight for Fairfax, but I'm a pacifist, and I have a glass jaw. My opportunity, and I do consider this an opportunity today, is to tell you about the the founding fathers of George Mason University, which by no coincidence are also the founding fathers of the modern Fairfax County. A little backstory first. In 2006, I was contracted to write a biography of Maggie Bryant, a formidable Virginian who passed away last year. Maggie owned the Dulles Greenway. That's right, that 15-mile stretch, she was the private owner of the first toll road to be built in America in about 200 years. And in the course of my research, I interviewed Sid Dewberry. Sid's company, Dewberry, built that road. And when that book came out, Sid contacted me and said, I've got a story for you. Can you come back to Arlington Boulevard, where the Dewberry building is? I want you to meet some friends of mine. I met that day with Sid and a group of other men in their 60s and 70s at the time. They included Milt Peterson, Earl Williams, Dwight Scharr, John Toops, Bill Hazel, George Johnson, Jerry Halpin, and Till Hazel. In that order, I shook each man's hand and ended with Till, who got right to business. It was obvious to me that Till was the nucleus of this group. He explained their interest in a book about the founding of the modern Fairfax County. He was an extremely gifted speaker, highly intelligent, articulate, and compelling. The story he told was a David and Goliath tale of persistence against great odds. I later learned that he had graduated from Harvard University and Harvard Law School. He just had me. I was so interested in everything he told me. And I said, yeah, I'd love to write this book. And then Till queried me like the serious lawyer he was. Why should we select you to write this book? So I cleared my throat to buy some time. And then I said, because I will be an objective reporter. If you're looking for someone to tell just your side of the story, you're going to have to look elsewhere. And Till then looked around Sid Dewberry's boardroom, and there were these expressions that were the equivalent of a thumbs up. And Till said, okay, you got it. In writing the book, I was fortunate to spend countless hours with each one of those fine gentlemen in Sid's office that day. I learned they were members of an informal group called the 123 Club, and more on that in a bit. I also interviewed scores of private citizens, Virginia state and county legislators, and other public officials, including 3 governors, about 250 people in all. Okay, now to the story. In my first interview with Till, he set the stage for what Fairfax County was and what it could become. In the story, he's 14 years old, and he's at his family's 110-acre working dairy farm in a neighbor's field, hauling hay, when he hears the unfamiliar sounds of construction nearby. And being a precocious teenager who literally pored over encyclopedias in his spare time, Till ventured over to see what was going on. And what was going on was the first subdivision in Fairfax County since the end of the Second World War, just a few months earlier. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Till got close to me and he said, I knew the area was changing, and I thought this was a good thing. Now that area in 1945 was composed of dairy farms like the one owned by Till's dad, John, a doctor, and the remnants of bygone plantations, tobacco plantations. All that was about to change for a reason. To address the rising threat of the Soviet Union, the federal government needed to vastly increase the number of employees in the defense and intelligence sectors. The population was set to explode in what would become the biggest change in the county since the arrival of the first settlers in the early 1600s. Tens of thousands of new federal employees were needed. The problem was Washington, D.C. didn't have the space to accommodate them all. Now that left Montgomery County in Maryland or Fairfax County in Virginia as the place to pick up the overflow. The problem was Fairfax County was the only one interested in doing just that. There was a problem, though, for Fairfax County at that time, transportation. There was only one highway in Northern Virginia, Shirley Highway, which ran from the Pentagon to Washington, D.C., and had a 2.5-mile spur that connected the Pentagon to Route 7. I'm sorry, the Pentagon to Washington, D.C., excuse me. Most other roads were for the agricultural sector. There were few businesses, fewer public schools, and less than 30,000 residents in all. Now, by contrast, today, Fairfax County is closing in on 1.2 million residents. In subsequent years, houses, but not businesses, appeared on the landscape. When a master plan was drawn up to increase the tax base for the western part of the county, that plan had several highways on it and high-density commercial buildings, and the new residents objected. They wanted Fairfax County to retain its pastoral qualities. And so they passed a series of restrictive zoning laws. And that's when the first round in the fight for Fairfax began. Entering the ring was Till Hazel, his legal skills sharpened for battle. Till leveraged the power of eminent domain to fight the restrictive zoning laws. He also condemned and acquired right-of-way land, clearing the way for highways like the Beltway to be built. And he did the same thing to develop new water and sewage treatment plants, and even the building of Washington Dulles Airport. Till won the first round for the fight for Fairfax, but then a new battle loomed. He and other private citizens and local officials wanted the county to become home to a major educational institution, what is today George Mason University. The driving force behind Mason's creation was Jack Wood, who was the mayor of the town of Fairfax. In June 1957, Fairfax County's Board of Supervisors provided $25,000 in funds to establish a 2-year branch of the University of Virginia. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because many of you were here earlier and learned that and probably knew even well beforehand. So the following year, University College, that's what it was called, this 2-year commuter college. It opened in a former elementary school with 7 classrooms in Bailey's Crossroads. 17 students made up the freshman class. Within 25 miles were more than 1,100 dairy farms. The number of cows easily outnumbered the students. On occasion, you could actually hear cows mooing beyond the schoolroom windows. So the students nicknamed their school, anyone know? No, not Moo College, Cow College. That's what University College was called. Determined to find a more suitable location, Mayor Wood, on behalf of the town of Fairfax, acquired 150 acres for a new campus with a new name, George Mason College. The campus is 4 buildings open to 365 students. And then on behalf of the university, or I should say the college, Till-Hazel acquired 2 more buildings on adjacent properties that opened the next year. Over the next quarter century, the number of students at Mason grew slowly. That year, the school became a 4-year institution, but it was still an extension of UVA. The senior class of about 58 students, well, I should say explicitly 58 students, graduated, and a group of them formed the first Alumni Association. As Samit talked about earlier today. Where are you? There you are. Thanks. Hi, Samit. On behalf of the university, Till now acquired 422 acres of land in 1969. And the following year, Mason began offering courses at the master's level. In 1972, however, round 2 in the fight for Fairfax opened. That's when UVA, the fight for UVA, finally came to a close, and no longer would George Mason College be an extension of the university. It was renamed George Mason University. Mayor Jack Wood was named the first rector, and Till-Hazel was appointed to the university's Board of Visitors. The bell now for round 3 rings. The Board of Visitors wanted dormitories for students, but the State Council on Higher Education preferred that Mason remain a commuter college. As the university's president at the time, Virgil Dykstra, told me, Richmond's attitude was one of condescension toward the upstart. Till and the rest of the Board of Visitors did not take kindly to this attitude. As board member George Cook confided to me, Till and I were on the same wavelength about what kind of institution we felt Mason could become. We would never attract students without dormitories, so we flexed our muscles and eventually got the General Assembly to support us. Mason was given the green light for dormitories, another round 1. But another challenge loomed. As Till explained, we needed someone who would work to make Mason the best it could be. Till's friends and business associates, like Milt Peterson, Dwight Shaw, Jerry Halpin, John Toops, Bill Hazel, and Earl Williams, also wanted to recruit a visionary leader for the university's next stages of development. In 1978, Earl, the CEO of government contractor BDM Corporation, came across a possible candidate. His name was George Johnson. At the time, George was the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Temple University. George was born and reared in Jamestown, North Dakota, during the Great Depression. His family was too poor to send him to college, but his academic excellence earned him a 4-year scholarship to the local college, Jamestown College. After graduating with a 4.0 GPA, George served in the Army during the Korean War, and upon his discharge, he tapped his GI Bill funding to get master's and doctoral degrees from Columbia University in New York. Mason's Board of Visitors wrote a letter to George inquiring about his interests in becoming Mason's next president. George replied that he had never heard of the institution. Upon visiting the campus, he didn't mince his words. He found Mason to be undistinguished, he said, in academics, research, publication, and athletics, pretty much everything. What Mason did have, George said, was location, only 15 miles from Washington, D.C. And it had one other thing, very important thing going for it, and that was a community of private citizens intent on growing the business base. Intent on growing the business base. And you'll realize in a few moments just how important that was to this institution and to all of Fairfax County. George took up the job offer. So to differentiate itself from more established universities like Virginia Tech or UVA, Mason had to innovate, George said. Standing in the way, however, was Richmond's power block of influential business people and state legislators in the state capitol. Their intent was obvious, George told me. They needed to suppress Mason to secure better funding, faculty, and students for the state's more advanced institutions. I learned my first week here, George said, that things were rigged to keep Mason from becoming a serious institute of higher learning. The bell for round 4 and the fight for Fairfax pealed. I was brought in to make a difference. It was practically open warfare, George said. And it was. With few alumni, little money, and a hostile political environment in the state's capital, making something different, making change happen was not going to be easy. But George Johnson, standing 6 feet 6 inches tall, enjoyed a good fight, and he shook things up on his very first day. George reached out to everyone and anyone with a stake in Fairfax County's future, from local officials, members of the Virginia State Assembly, to the home builders, real estate developers, construction companies, and engineers that were changing the landscape. He also built close ties with the CEOs of the Beltway Bandits. And these were technology companies headquartered in Fairfax County, like Earl Williams BDM and PRC, led by John Toops. The benefits were mutual, George explained. And he described this virtuous circle. A first-rate university would draw more companies to Fairfax County, which could then provide high-paying jobs to Mason's undergraduates and graduates, students. And then by igniting business growth, the boom would reverberate across Fairfax County. And George's background as an English professor, he had a penchant for the writings of Nathaniel Hawthorne, served him well in eloquently describing his plans. He portrayed Fairfax County as, quote, lying in the shadow of the Paris of the 21st century. Paris being Washington, D.C., of course. He said that the county was an epicenter of global change, or a golden, fertile crescent on the Potomac. A Wild West frontier where pioneering companies and other enterprises were sure to grow along with the territory, tailoring each of those descriptions to whomever he was talking. Newspaper reporters ate it up, and so did his new friends like Till Hazel, Sid Dewberry, Milt Peterson, and Dwight Scharr. As Dwight told me, George was able to get all these different people to move heaven and earth, making the impossible not just possible, but practical. George believed that by clustering the Beltway Bandits in a specific geographic location in Fairfax County, that George wanted to do that, but by clustering them, then Fairfax County could become that epicenter of global change. As he said to me, proximity breeds greater competition, more diverse ideas, and more diverse business. And to serve as the liaison with all these technology companies, or I should say these few technology companies, George created the George Mason Institute of Science and Technology in 1978. And he pointed out that the Stanford Research Institute did the same thing in creating what eventually became Silicon Valley. The bandits lined up behind the new president's plans, and so did Sid, Till, Dwight, Earl, and the rest of George's new friends. They all joined the fledgling George Mason Institute of Science and Technology. At the same time, they continue to support the university through gifts of land and funding and joining other advisory boards and governing councils. By the 1980s, that institute numbered the original 18 members and the national or global leaders of a who's who of companies: Boeing, Xerox, IBM, ComSat, AT&T, Mobil Oil, GTE, Honeywell, and others. The institute did what George had predicted. It coalesced the discrete economic forces spread throughout the county into a unified whole, just like what happened in Silicon Valley. In 1993, the institute tallied 300 members. Today, it's known as the Northern Virginia Technology Council. It serves more than 1,000 companies from all sectors across the technology industry, employing, get this, 300,000 people. Thanks to George and his new friends, Mason's reputation was soaring, but more needed to be done. George mentioned to Till that for a university to be considered a world-class institution, it needed professional schools, like a law school. Till nodded his assent and then smiled broadly. Since his very first day on the Board of Visitors, he made the creation of a law school his #1 priority. Back in 1973, Till petitioned the General Assembly in Richmond, the capital, to approve the development of a law school at Mason and was summarily rebuffed. He did the same thing the next year and every year thereafter through 1978, and again was snubbed. Legislators even responded in a letter that an additional law school was not needed in the Commonwealth in the foreseeable future, and even if another law school was needed in Virginia, George Mason was not the place to locate it. Ding, 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 round 5 in the fight for Fairfax now commences. Till refuses to capitulate. An opportunity finally emerges when a private law school, the International School of Law, moves from Washington, D.C. to an abandoned department store in Arlington. The university's Board of Visitors advised the George Mason Foundation, which Till had founded, to buy the property for $3.2 million in November 1978, just 1 month before that school's lease was about to expire. It didn't go over well with the state legislature, which tried to block the purchase not once, but twice. To solicit the General Assembly's approval, Till again drove down to Richmond in 1979, but this time, several students from the International School of Law drove down to join him in solidarity. Till humbly told me, the real lobbyists, the effective ones, were the students. They were serious people who just wanted a good law school. They went down there and talked quietly and behaved and got the job done. The law school was approved the next day. With a bit of icing on the cake, the General Assembly also voted to approve Mason for doctoral status, unanimously. Round 6 now begins. Having lost several prior battles, the Richmond power bloc was alarmed at Northern Virginia's growing presence in the high-tech and information sectors. The new businesses were fast supplanting the Commonwealth's legacy industries, like dairy farms and shipyards and tobacco and paper mills. Cognizant of the influence the downstate interests still had over Fairfax County, George decided to form an alliance with area business people with sharp elbows, he said, to make sure that Northern Virginia received its fair share of state resources. The 123 Club was born. The club's name was a challenge to Richmond's Main Street Club, which was another group representing area business people located on Main Street. The club members felt, well, you know, Route 123, that's our de facto Main Street, so we're going to be the 123 Club, kind of throwing down the gauntlet. The original members, and of course by now you can guess who they are: Till Hazel, Earl Williams, Milt Peterson, Dwight Scharr, John Toops, Sid Dewberry, Earl Williams, Milt Drewer, the president of First American Bank, and of course, George Johnson. And what a club it was. We had Republicans and Democrats. It was a balanced kind of group, Dwight said. And I had so hoped that Dwight would be here today, but he's feeling a bit under the weather. While we had different political beliefs and voiced them, we ultimately decided not to figure out who is right, but what is right. Fortunately, Dwight said, we also had George Johnson expertly playing the role of moderator. The club's principal goal was to make the county the best it could possibly be. We were a close-knit group of people with different backgrounds and interests who were committed to doing the right thing, Dwight said. That meant education, healthcare, parks, and high-quality, high-paying jobs. What we were really doing was public policy, putting the spotlight on problems in Northern Virginia that required the attention of policymakers for the public's benefit. Whoever supported these positions, we supported. Whether they were Democrats or Republicans, didn't matter to us. The club's meetings were informal gatherings at Mason's president's mansion. George and his wife Joanne served dinner while the members hammered out strategies to secure money from the state capitol for the county's needs, from education to roads to health care. Depending on the agenda, a Virginia congressman, a senator, or a governor might be present. One of the great ideas that percolated at the Johnson dinner table was the Center for Innovative Technology, the CIT. By providing capital and market development to innovative technology startups, the CIT acted like an incubator, creating new technology companies for Northern Virginia. In 1985, a 150,000 square foot complex was built in Herndon to house the CIT. Many of you have probably seen it. It was within 25 miles of more than 800 technology companies, 525 of them in Fairfax County alone. Now that's 1985. That number has been elapsed by many hundreds. One of the CIT's 5 on-campus research institutes, located at Mason, subsequently launched the School of Information Technology and Engineering, the first school in the nation to offer a PhD in IT. Following a donation by the university's rector, Dr. Ernst Volgenau, and his wife Sarah, the school was renamed the Volgenau School of Information and Technology, School of Information Technology and Engineering. Mason now had the beginnings of a technology school that could compete with the likes of Virginia Polytechnic Institute or the University of Virginia in attracting top-notch engineering students from all over the world. Magazines and newspapers like the Washington Post suddenly began to refer to Fairfax County as the Silicon Valley of the East, which prompted George to quip that Silicon Valley would someday be known as the Fairfax County of the West. When George Johnson arrived at Mason in 1978, it was a commuter school. He counted 26 buildings, he told me, and that included every chicken coop, outhouse, and shack on campus. He was from North Dakota. When he retired in 1996, there were too many structures to count, more than 120 buildings in all, including the 10,000-seat Patriot Center, Eagle Bank Arena today. Mason became what he knew it could become, a major institution of higher learning with an enrollment that had then doubled to 20,000 students over the course of his tenure. Yet were it not for the sharp elbows of the 123 Club members sitting down with George and Joanne at the Johnson dinner table, neither Mason nor the county would have become what it is today. Look around you and you see their names everywhere. The George W. Johnson Center, comprising this beautiful atrium, the Sid and Reva Dewberry Hall, the Sid and Reva Dewberry Department of Infrastructure Engineering, the Reva and Sid Dewberry Family School of Music, because Reva loved the arts. And as we learned earlier today, the Dewberry family has made a major commitment to the arts at George Mason. The John Toops Instructional Laboratory, the Mr. and Mrs. John M. Toops Nursing Clinical Simulation Laboratories, the John Toops Presidential Medal for Faculty Excellence in Teaching, the Gerald T. Halpin Family Living and Learning Community at the Smithsonian Mason School of Conservation, the Earl Williams Medal for Excellence in Social Impact, the Peterson Performing Arts Center, the Peterson Family Health Sciences Hall. Milt Peterson told me, philanthropy is like investing on Wall Street. You look for where you're going to get the best return. And this facility, since it will benefit the health of all of us, offered the best return of all. Milt passed away last year. George died in 2017. Till Hazel left us only last month. Only two of the original 123 Club members I sat down with in interviews in 2006 are with us today, Sid Dewberry and Dwight Scharr. The impact their lives made on me is indelible. I've written many books, I've done a lot of things, but the fight for Fairfax remains for me my most important work. Like his cherished friends, Dwight has committed his time and resources to Mason's present and future. When the university announced that it hoped to create a new school of public policy, Dwight stepped up and made one of the largest gifts in Mason's history. He had previously endowed a faculty chair at the former School of Public Policy. His motivation in helping to create the new School of Policy, Government, and International Affairs, he told me, was to train tomorrow's leaders to tackle the most complex problems facing our country and our world today. I wanted to ensure the school provided a better understanding of how good public policy works and where it falls short, given the tremendous impact it can have on this region. Today, the Scharr School offers degrees in public policy, government, international commerce, international security, and other study fields, 12 degree granting programs in all. More than 90 full-time faculty members teach courses to over 800 undergraduate students, 760 master's degree students, and 114 doctoral students. It's one of the biggest and best schools anywhere in the world, home to the Michael V. Hayden Center and the Stephen S. Fuller Institute. And by the way, informing the Institute, Dwight did what he'd done before, as had the other members of the 123 Club. They reached out to each other and their friends for capital. As former Virginia Congressman Tom Davis, also a former Mason rector, told me, Dwight's a visionary in everything he does. Look at the prestigious school that surrounds us today. It is indeed an epicenter of global change, as George Johnson foresaw. Students here are privileged to study in one of the most culturally diverse and inclusive institutions anywhere in America. Back in 1963, not a single black student graduated at George Mason, was in the graduating class at George Mason College. George Johnson's successors, Alan Merton, Angel Cabrera, Ann Holton, and Gregory Washington, have put or are putting their respective marks on this great institution, as have countless engaged and passionate teachers, including several governors and legislators, and now 2 Nobel laureates and counting. But it's the young people, the members of Generation Z. It's their diverse ideas and efforts that are this world's future. And I hope those of you who are students, and I see several of you, I hope the example of the 123 Club is instructive insofar as the impact public citizens can have on a region and in the creation of an institution like this. Soon it will be your turn to advocate for public policies. Mountains can be moved in the spirit of progress. Virtually all the members of the 123 Club have received the George Mason Medal, the university's highest honor, esteeming individuals who have a record of service to their community, state, or nation consistent with the level and quality of the historical George Mason's public service in his own time. Till Hazel was awarded the first Mason Medal in 1987. In 2005, an Arlington campus building constructed for the George Mason University School of Law, a law school that might not exist today were it not for his persistence and the efforts of those student protesters that drove down there to join him, was named the John T. Hazel Jr. Hall. Through Till's last days, he and his friends never gave up the fight for Fairfax. More rounds emerged, and they tied on the gloves. The winners are George Mason University and Fairfax County. Till saw the future as a boy. He had a grand vision of what the county could become, and he helped to make it happen. As the Washington Post stated last month, when you traverse Northern Virginia and survey its institutions today, much of what you see was touched by or sprang from Till Hazel's vision. The newspaper's former publisher, Donald Graham, concurred. Till was the greatest DC area community leader of my time, hands down. I miss Till. We corresponded through the years. Whenever I was in this area, he invited me to lunch, and he picked up the tab. We discussed current events. We never talked about the past. He remained just as sharp and as committed as the first day that I met him in Sid Dewberry's boardroom. I remember talking to him after the second edition of The Fight for Fairfax came out in 2020. And he said to me, "I'm so glad we picked you to write it." Me too. Thank you.
We have research, we have an engineering school, we have a law school, and we have a great university. In fact, I would suggest that we have the success story of the last half century in American higher education.
I'm just going to redo it. I think I could do it better.